Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In this episode, I traveled to Fredericktown in Madison County, Missouri, to interview Jason, who had a few eye-sighting encounters when he was just a child. This area of Missouri is a hotspot for Bigfoot activity. Of course, this is a Mark Twain Nation Forest town, and the St.Francis River does run through the area. I do believe these creatures are following the waterways like many other researchers have speculated, but of course, there are many strange theories regarding encounters with cryptid creatures. People have reported to have found entrances to the underworld in this area, and people have also claimed to see Dogman and strange UFO activity. Jason is a down-to-earth guy that believes this is a flesh and blood creature that lives out in the forest and is able to evade humans at all costs. If you guys enjoy listening to Bigfoot encounters, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you have a Bigfoot or cryptid encounter that you would like to share here on the channel, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. All right, Jason, if you would, tell me about the first encounter that you had and what all have you experienced out here?
Okay. We're on property that I grew up on as a kid. My parents built this house in 1973, and I was allowed to roam the woods as long as I couldn't get out of basically the range of her voice. She liked to be able to see me, but that wasn't going to happen once I hit the woods. And I was always out here playing. Never saw anything, never heard anything, and then just one day, my dog and I are on some property of some old mines right here behind our property, maybe 250 yards from the house, and we're on a power line, and I look down the power line, and a couple hundred yards away, there's what looks like a bear standing on its hind legs, just walking out of the woods. Well, the dog started getting pretty nervous, whimpering and whining, and I noticed the wind was blowing toward us from whatever this was. And so I knew it couldn't smell us, as I knew we were safe, but the dog insisted that we leave, and I just told him to calm down. I knelt on the ground and started watching this thing. Roughly 6.5, 7 feet tall, wasn't ungodly tall, but was dark brown, hairy all over, and it seemed pretty skittish. At first I was just sure it was a bear walking on its hind legs because there was no other explanation. Well, when I saw it turn and pivot on its foot and walk back into the tree line, I knew it wasn't a bear at that point. And I got more interested, and a few minutes later he sneaks back out and basically got to the utility poles in the middle of this power line cut and would go back to the tree line. He just acted like he was really nervous. And after the third time, he went into the woods and didn't come back out. And this is 250 yards away, and I know how fast I can clear 250 yards. I started getting a little nervous like the dog and figured it was time to get home. So we came back to the yard, and I really didn't think much about it. Okay. I was probably 12 or 13, so it would have been 83, 84. And I was walking up this road with my dog. And as we came up here, I looked down that power line, and right where it looks like there's a log laying down, probably 200 yards away, I saw something step out of the woods. I thought, well, is that a bear? And the dog, he walks up here and sniffs the air because air was blowing toward us, and he started growling real low and whimpering and whining and trying to run back toward the house. So we sat there for a few minutes, and I just knelt down on the ground and watched. And the dog was complaining, wanting to go back, and I looked down, and what looked to be a bear walked out of the woods on its hind legs, stopped, looked around, turned and walked back into the woods. And at that point I realized that's not a bear. And he did that 2 more times and ended up getting halfway across that power line and got scared. He physically acted scared, and he just walked back into the woods. And it was at that point that I got scared, knowing that he could come up through the woods at any moment if he wanted to, and realizing that it wasn't a bear, it was something else that I'd never seen. I thought it was a pretty good idea to get the hell out of here and get going home. So I started moving pretty quick toward the house, which is only a couple hundred yards. And the dog would run ahead of me and whimper and wait for me, and then run ahead of me and whimper and wait for me. He didn't want any part of it.
Yeah. What color was the creature?
Best I could tell, it was shadowed like it is now, but not nearly that bad. It was dark in color, but it, I'd say dark brown. Definitely not a medium brown, but not a black.
Okay.
But
so it was kind of nervous. It was going back and forth.
yeah, and it wasn't. It didn't look huge. I mean, it wasn't ungodly tall. And even at that distance, you can gauge the height of a man. He was taller than a man by far, but not a lot. You know, maybe 7 feet at most. And but he acted scared, like he was scared to walk across there. Made it halfway, you know, and then would turn around and go back. And I was kind of amused. And then once he went back into the woods, I thought, you know, that's not that far away. I just really need to go. But
About how tall do you think the creature was?
around 7.
Around 7?
Feet, yeah.
Okay.
And this area at that time, there would have been almost nobody in here. Deer hunters didn't even come here. And it was summertime because I was in shorts. You know, I vaguely remember it was extremely comfortable out. Dog and I were playing in the yard. So, you know, just that was the only one I've ever physically seen.
Yeah. There's probably more around if you saw that one.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't too long after that. Later that summer, maybe the next summer, I'm laying in bed, and I always slept with my curtains open, and a lot of times the window open during the summertime. We had air conditioning, but it didn't get turned on unless it was necessary. So I'm laying there one night, and the full moon always would shine over my head into my room and light the whole room up. And one night I'm laying there, got my eyes closed, and I opened them up. I didn't really hear anything, nothing out of the ordinary, but all of a sudden, just the room went black. I thought, that's weird. There's no clouds tonight. You know, starry sky, full moon. So I laid there wondering what it could be. And I got brave enough that I just kind of turned and looked up over the head of my bed, and I could see it staring down at me. He was actually taller than my window. His head was just above the window a little bit, and I could see him just sitting there looking at me. We met eyes, and I just reached up, pulled the curtains closed. Went to my sister's room, closed her curtains. And from then on, we didn't sleep with the curtains open at all, ever. And I really don't remember seeing anything else. I may have seen a shadow cast over the window, you know, at one time or another, but if you can't physically see something, you're not scared of it, generally. So I never worried about it again. I say physically seen. I turned around and looked out my bedroom window one night because something had blocked out the light coming through the window, and all I could see was just some darkness and a little bit of a face above my bedroom window. And after that, I just reached up, flipped the curtain shut, and did the same to my sister's room. But after that, I always slept with my curtains pulled shut because the moon would shine right through my bedroom window. And, you know, it's just one of those deals where I woke up in the middle of the night, my room was lit up always. And I was laying there with my eyes, you know, open one night, and all of a sudden just got dark in my room. And I thought, well, that's not normal. Yeah. And I laid there and wondered for a little bit, and then finally I got the guts to look, and I just did one of these over my shoulder like that, and looked, and I could see him looking down at me. His head was higher than the top of my window. He was looking down, his shoulders were just, you know, huge as far as width. And I just reached up, grabbed the curtains, and did one of those. But, you know, that I saw very little because I was so scared. I just looked up, saw it, and pulled the curtain shut.
You've heard some strange noises around here?
On rare occasion.
On rare occasions. So this was the bedroom window right here?
Yeah, that's the one where I slept. And the moon would always rise over here, and it'd come up and it'd shine right here in that window and light up most of that room. And when I was laying in my bed under that window and I looked up, his face was above the top of the window. And his shoulders took up the entire window. And like I said, that was the only time I ever saw one or woke up when one was looking in the window at me. And they didn't get a chance after that. I just kept the curtains closed.
Did you just see the silhouette, or could you see the creature's face?
I could physically see features on his face. I didn't see any red eyes or anything like that you hear people talk about. But I could see, of course, the moon's shining right behind him. So the silhouette and features were, very good.
He was looking down at you?
Yeah, he was actually looking down. So his head was, so I'm gonna grab a stick. His head would have been about right here looking down at me.
Oh, wow.
Because I couldn't see the top of his head, but I could see from about the middle of his brow down. But the whole window was blocked across here. There was no moonlight coming through the window.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting.
Back in the spring of this year, 2024, we were on the porch one night and heard what sounded like somebody screaming, a woman, but it was probably at least 3 to a half mile away. And my mom and my sister heard it, and they called me out, and I gave a couple of calls like they would do on their, show Finding Bigfoot. And I got a little bit of a return back, but I couldn't tell if it was a coyote. It was so far off by that time, it was really hard to tell what it was.
Yeah.
But other than that, I've not really heard much around here as far as vocal activity. I don't ever remember hearing tree knocks as a kid very often.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they were around here much, but they were around enough, for me to see one there. They came around the house at night sometimes. And one morning I went out to sled down the hill. We'd got 4 inches of snow. And I took my little plastic saucer and I jumped on it and I went down the hill, and I get to the bottom of the hill, and right by the sidewalk I see this footprint. Now the footprint wasn't big. It was 14 or 15 as far as size goes. And it was barefoot. And I asked my mother, I said, why was Dad out here walking around in his bare feet before he went to work this morning? She goes, he wasn't out there in his bare feet. There's snow on the ground. Why would he do that? I said, well, there's a bare footprint right here. And she just blew it off and said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. There's no footprint there. Never even bothered to go look. She just walked back inside.
Yeah.
So
you could see toes?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And full 5 toes. It looked like a human print, but it was just a little bigger.
Right. Okay.
So,
Very cool.
it was convincing enough. I thought my own dad had put the print there.
Yeah.
So the only other time I remember seeing anything was a footprint right out in the front yard after a fresh 4 inches worth of snow one morning. I went and got my little plastic saucer. Sled doesn't go very good in snow, so we'd pack it down with the saucer and then ride the sled on it later. So I jumped on it, slid down the hill, and I got to the bottom and stopped, and right by a sidewalk, I saw this footprint. Man's footprint, if you ask me, about yay long, size 12 or 13. Normal footprint, 5 toes. And I hollered at my mom. She stuck her head out the front door. I'm like, why did Dad walk barefooted outside this morning? And, there's a footprint here. So he was out here walking around barefooted. Why did he do that? And she goes, your dad didn't do that. I watched him put his boots on and he left and went to work. And I got to thinking, well, why would he come out in his bare feet in the snow anyway? I said, well, there's a footprint here. You'll want to come and look at it. And she goes, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're seeing stuff. And that was the end of it. It wasn't discussed anymore. And basically those are the only things that have really happened here around the property.
You said your dad mentioned seeing a UFO land?
It was my grandpa.
Your grandpa.
My grandparents live on the property next to us, probably 200 yards, 150 yards away. And several years ago, I would have been really small, so it would have been in the early 70s. Grandpa got up to get a glass of water one night, and he looks out the kitchen window, and there's a UFO landing in a little grassy patch on a hillside behind the house. Never knew that story until my cousin and I were up there playing. The grass would always get about 3 feet tall. We were young, we weren't very tall ourselves. And we'd get down that grass crawling around and you couldn't see us. You didn't even know we were there. And we found this spot. It was about 12 foot in diameter. It was round where the grass didn't grow. And all the trees around the outer edge were just kind of pushed back. They were small saplings and they were all dead. So we would get in the center of that and we would hide out. That was like our little hideout where we'd get in there where people couldn't see us. And we'd hang out there. And we asked our grandpa one day, why is there a spot up there that's round where nothing grows? And he said, well, it could have something to do with that UFO that I saw land there several years ago. And we laughed at him. We were kids. Yeah, there's not a UFO. He goes, believe me if you want, I'm telling you, a UFO landed there. He said, I watched it for a few minutes and just went back to bed. And that's basically the extent of that. And now in that spot, we took the bulldozer and dug in, and that's where my sister's house now resides. So yeah. This old rundown place was my grandparents' house when I was young. And my grandpa was looking out the kitchen window, which would be that far gable. He was looking up here on this hillside, and he saw something. He blinked because he just woke up and was getting him a glass of water. He said, there's a UFO that landed up there on that hillside. And because my cousin and I would go up here and play. And at that time, this was kind of a field. Grass was about that tall. And we'd get down and crawl around. We could hide in it. Well, there was one spot where the grass didn't grow. It was about 12 feet apart or 12 feet across and completely circular. And there were some small saplings about that big. And they were all just kind of pushed out around the edge of it. And they were dead. You could tell they'd been dead for a while. Mm-hmm. But we would get in there and play and nobody could see us because the grass was tall around us. And that was when it came time to build my sister's house. This was the best spot to put it. And it just happened to be right in the spot where Grandpa saw that UFO land.
Okay. So. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, the sighting that you had on the power line strip is pretty interesting. You said it's around the same time frame that you saw that creature look into the window.
Yeah, I'd say it was within a year or two. And now that I look back, I guess they were around. And we just, we didn't go outside after dark unless we were working in the yard or, we cleared off that whole field area down there. That was nothing but trees and woods. Sometimes we'd be out working and burning brush till after dark, but not very often. I'd sit on the porch and listen to owls hoot, but I don't ever remember hearing anything out of the ordinary. And I was in the woods constantly as a kid. If it was something different, I would have recognized it. And being out in the woods now and hearing hoops and woots, and I never heard that when I was a child living here.
Yeah.
Still don't hear that here very much, but that's something. If there'd have been vocal activity here when I was a kid, I would have heard it because we slept with our windows open a lot. Mm-hmm.
I've taken a lot of reports from this area of Missouri. What's your theory as to why there's so many Bigfoot encounters around here?
Very heavily wooded. There's so many places for them to hide. I mean, if there's a house every quarter or half mile along a highway and you get back on these 2-lane blacktop roads and you don't see a house for 5 or 6 miles, what's to stop them from running the woods?
Yeah,
there's just so much area and nobody out there. How are you going to know if they're there? I'm sure they were here long before us, and they'll be here long after we're gone.
Yeah, there's a lot of waterways. You mentioned the crystal rock. There's a lot of granite, a lot of pine trees, oaks.
In our area,
what
there's
they like.
Quite a bit of quartz for whatever reason.
I don't know what that has to do with it, but maybe like what we discussed earlier, possibly like the mining or the logging disrupts these creatures and they move from one area to another.
Yeah. And about the time we moved in out here in 73, there was quite a bit of logging. And then after the logging was over, that would have been when they were around. Because I had a three-wheeler, and I'd ride logging roads through these woods and over on the mines property for hours. Now most of those roads are grown up, you know.
Yeah.
But I just don't remember any activity after, say, that summer, 83, 84. I just really don't remember any activity after that. Now, I was getting into my teenage years, going to school, playing ball, running track. So I wasn't around a lot, but I was still outside after dark, and I just never saw or heard anything.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the skull that somebody found? We won't say their name or anything, but
We can.
okay.
There's some people that live in the southern area of this county. Don't know what year it would have been. I would guess 50s, 60s, somewhere in there. A guy goes out in his yard one day, and the dogs are messing with something. He walks over to see what it is, and if you've got dogs and you live in the country, they're constantly dragging in a deer carcass. They've killed a possum or a raccoon. There's something in the yard. So he's going to pick it up and throw it over a fence or something. And he walks up and he picks it up and looks at it, and it's a skull without a lower mandible. And it's got kind of a conical shape to the head, and it's got brown fur on it. And he thought, well, that's kind of weird. You know, he picks it up, looks at it, and took it away from the dogs. He showed it to the family, and at some point, he decides to take it to their local community church, which is where everybody in that community would gather, you know, for church picnics, any events. I don't know if he took it to church on a Sunday or what he did, but he had it in like a little suitcase. I'm not saying like that little one sitting there, but more of a cosmetic crate. Suitcase like a woman would have carried back then, that she could put her hair dryer and her stuff in. And he took it in that and showed it to everybody at the church that day and just told them, hey, dogs drug this in. Has anybody seen anything like it? And of course, nobody had. He got curious and loaned it to a couple of universities that examined it. One university said something to the tune of, well, we've never seen anything like it. You must have made this. Another one said, well, we've done some DNA testing on it, and there's no known animal that it comes back to. And they tried to buy it off of him, and he refused. You know, he got it back, and as far as I know, it's still in the family, but I don't know what family member got it for sure. Mm-hmm. But I'm waiting on a phone call back from someone that's distantly related in hopes that we might get access to it. Okay. And maybe hear the real story, because what I'm telling you has been passed down through 3 or 4 people. It could be right, it could be wrong.
Yeah.
So if
I want to see it.
Yeah, so if we hear it from somebody in the family that actually knows firsthand, that would be the story I'd go with. Yeah. I wouldn't put too much credit in what I've just told you because it's been through 3 or 4 people.
Right. And there was a family around here back in the day that was experiencing a lot of Bigfoot activity. They were called the Slocums.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever hear about them?
I had heard people mention it, actually at my local historic society where I'm a member. There have been some people joke about it a few times. And oddly enough, my dad passed away about 3 years ago, and I was going through some of his paperwork right over there on the shelves and just organizing, throwing stuff away. And I picked one up that said something about a gorilla hunt. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And I think it was probably dated, if there's a date on it, it's 20s or 30s. Mm. And, you know, I read the story, you know, it was mildly amusing. It was meant to be amusing because the person that wrote it didn't believe that they saw anything. He was just stating what he was told. Turns out later that, you know, the area that happened in, there are people that still see and hear things to this day. Mm-hmm. So it was, but that's all they knew back then. They didn't know Sasquatch, Bigfoot. They saw something that looked like a gorilla, and oh, well, we had several train tracks through the area. That's a gorilla. He jumped off when the circus went through, or something of that sort. You know, they just whatever made sense to them at the time would be the story.
Yeah. I interviewed one of the surviving family members, and I got the video up on my channel. I mean, he didn't really see anything, but he recalls his family talking about it, and that's about it. And he shared like a photo from the newspaper of one of the family members holding a track. It looked like a little juvenile track. It was pretty interesting, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's the same area where Adam claims, you know, a family was having like Dogman encounters. I mean, it's not too far from here either.
Well, when you go to Adam's house and you look, you don't see many houses. You see nothing but trees and river.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was one, that's where I'd want to live.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And it blows my mind how they can live around people and never be seen. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, you'd have to go to this deep, deep, deep remote area and possibly there's Sasquatch, but they're around us.
Yeah.
And
people don't pay attention.
yeah, people don't pay attention.
They just
But I mean, even if you do, they're just really hard to spot, and they could be sitting there. As long as they're not moving, you would have no idea that it's there.
No, because you're not that conscious. You're focused on what you're doing in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether you're hiking or looking for plants or whatever you're doing, or looking for trees to cut, you're not focused on something maybe peeking around the corner looking at you.
Mm-hmm. I think our eyesight's based on movement, and somehow they know that through hunting and observing each other. I think.
And generally, when I'm in the woods, I recognize things that aren't supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, if it blends in, I'm not going to see it.
Yeah, it's not until like a deer starts walking that you notice it, or it flickers its tail, and it's like, oh, there's a deer there.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same thing with these creatures.
Well, they're definitely interesting.
And what do you think they are?
I'm not even going to speculate. I mean,
It's unknown.
yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just another animal that lives in the woods. No different than a wolf, a coyote, a squirrel. You know, just something else that lives here. It just happens to have a little more intelligence.
Yeah,
And that's the reason they're not seen, is because they're intelligent.
absolutely. So what do we got? What
Okay.
happened here?
We were waiting for some people to come out of this subdivision right over here, and my truck was backed up against that gate. And I was sitting here with the windows down, and I heard a whoop from over that direction, probably right at a quarter mile.
So all the way over there across the highway?
Well, it was across the highway and back that direction. There's an old sawmill up there, and there's a road that takes you up there, and I recognized the sound, and so I thought, okay, I'll put out a good long holler, and I did. And within 1 minute, he was in the corner of that field and screamed back at me. And as he screamed from the corner of that field, I just instant fear. And I never thought I would be scared if I, physically heard one that close. But I started my truck and I went down to this next drive, which is 150, 200 yards. That's where my buddy Taylor was waiting on me. And I said, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "What?" "I've been sitting here with my radio on, talking on the phone the whole time." He said, "I didn't hear anything." And I guess just with this buffer of trees between us, it was enough that, it just stopped the sound from reaching him. But when he screamed, every dog in that neighborhood and every cricket just stopped, and it was dead silent.
What kind of scream? Like a woman being gutted, or like more of a monstrous?
No, more of a monstrous howl with a growl at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It started out long and high pitched, basically mocking what I had done, but at the end it was so deep and guttural and growling that it was enough to put fear into me, especially knowing he was right there. And when I hollered, he was a quarter mile away, and he knew exactly where I hollered from. He came right here without getting extremely close.
Yeah.
I mean, he stayed within the safety of the woods down there in the corner of that field. But it was enough to put the fear of God in me, and I got the heck out of here. Even though I was sitting in my truck and was totally safe, I left quick.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. What did you think originally?
I mean, I knew what it was.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but I just, I always thought if I got close to one like that, I wouldn't be that scared, that I would be more interested. But he let me know he didn't want me here, basically, is what it was.
Yeah. When you hear one of them, it'll shock you.
Yeah.
You think you can go in there and check it out, but when you know they're in there, you're like, nope, screw that.
Yeah.
No way.
Okay, well, that's really all that happened here.
Yeah.
So we can move to the campground and look at the trees, I guess, and you can check that area out. Upstream, probably a mile and a half, is where a buddy of mine, his wife, and the people they were visiting, they were riding side by side through the woods, and they looked down into a valley next to the river, and there were 2 juveniles playing down there. They watched them for 4 or 5 minutes.
Oh, that'd be pretty cool.
And you know, they were upwind, so they couldn't smell them, you know, so they were safe to be there for as long as they wanted without being seen. So they were just really quiet and enjoyed watching them play for a while.
Yeah. Whenever I was in Alaska, we'd be driving on the highway, and there'd be like creeks that go underneath the highway and into the woods, and there's like people like salmon fishing in there, and they're just fishing next to grizzly bears. The grizzly bears are like eating salmon, and they're just fishing away. It's like, oh man.
You know, if you've got that kind of rapport with wildlife, it's great.
Yeah. So it was like that, but with 2 juveniles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they weren't even close. I mean, they were like
At a
down
distance.
that power line where I saw one. They were a good distance off. They didn't want to get closer. They didn't want to disturb them, you know.
Yeah.
They just enjoyed watching them play.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've seen a juvenile before. It's definitely life-changing. All right, Jason, thank you very much for sharing your encounters and experiences from Fredericktown, Missouri openly with me here on Sasquatch Theory. Like I said before, I've taken a lot of Bigfoot reports from this area, and it seems to be a hot spot in the Ozarks. After I started doing Bigfoot research, I noticed Fredericktown popping up a lot, and I believe it has to do with the Mark Twain Nation Forest, the creeks, the St. Francis River, and the fact that this is a small town and there's not a whole lot of people there, but there's a ton of forest. I also don't discount the idea of underground worlds, paranormal activity, portals, orbs, and just all the strange things you hear when you listen to these reports. I think there's a lot out there that people don't know and understand, and if you're not open to the idea, you're not doing your self-diligence, and there is a lot out there for science to discover. Just because you don't understand something does not mean it does not exist. Alright, I appreciate everyone for supporting the channel, and if you have had a Bigfoot sighting, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com, and I would love to listen to your encounter. Thank you very much, everyone, and be safe out there in the forest.